Never have we been in a time where we find ourselves where a pandemic has disrupted technology. Across the board, technology and how we use it today is dramatically different. You go from 10 million users to 400 active million users in Zoom in a matter of a course of months.
Welcome to Expanding Wallet, Home for Empowerment. My name is Andrew Clarke. I'm the CEO and founder of Expanding Wallet. And you might have heard about the Metaverse, especially since Mark Zuckerberg dropped it and talked about how Facebook is changing their name to Meta and gave a glimpse of what it may look like. Today's guest is actually an emergent technologist in the virtual and augmented reality space. And he's also a Silicon Valley national and international speaker and the founder of the Black Technology Mentorship Program. It's my great honor to introduce you to Christopher Lafayette. How you doing today, Chris?
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man. Thank you for joining us. Really excited to have you and just kind of break down, a lot of what's going on in this new space for a lot of people that, they're not familiar with this. And before we jump in, I want you just to explain, what is an emergent technologist?
As simply as I can state it, that an emergent technologist is someone that studies emerging technologies and applied sciences, where we examine the technologies that abide within the eco-habitat and have a better understanding on ethnography speaking, where they come from, what were the intentions of these technologies that have been placed inside the eco-habitat, how do they abide in their micro ecosystems and amongst one another, and then how do they cross convert, which we call the merge pairing, which we're seeing the fundamental constructs of smart city installations being developed and built.
Yeah, 100%. I know what smart cities are, but can you explain that? Because that is definitely going to be something that we're going to be seeing very soon, especially like 5G, as that's built out more.
Well, think about from this perspective of these great metropolitan cities, transmetropolitan, across the country and around the world, where we become more dependent on technology itself. And technology serves more than just an intermediary of how we function and cohabitate and interact with our daily environments, but will do it more fluidly, more naturally when it comes to what type of technologies are being applicated that are more central to how we operate. Mm-hmm. So in other words, when we talk about the smart city, it's more than just IoT and it's more than just products, but it's the way that technology cohabitates with itself. And from the way that we live, lifestyle, and consume to enterprise use cases, we will start to see more developed uses for technology in ways that we haven't, that will begin to, in many ways, disrupt traditional bedrock processes that have been quite substantial since we can go all the way back to where I think our audience will understand today when we begin to look at the industrial age way of work.
Can you give okay, so is there a specific example you could give on that?
Sure. Let's take a look at the great disruption of cars and technology itself and autonomous vehicles and LiDAR systems that are prepared and embodied. So there was a time where we had taxis, and taxis have undoubtedly been disrupted by Uber and Lyft.
Yeah.
Well, Uber and Lyft is getting ready to disrupt itself. And so now you're going to have autonomous vehicles. But let's think about that for a second. Autonomous vehicles, more about, we now find ourselves in a remote distributed world. We become more virtual in the past 19 months than we have the past 20 years. But the less dependency that we have for vehicles and motor vehicles, especially since there's a supply chain disruption for chips, the less we become dependent on that, guess what? That means the less that we need parking lots.
Right.
Parking lots could be converted into housing. What type of housing? Since housing is a very big deal, now we're thinking about sustainable housing as opposed to the type of housing that we're used to, because now we're serving a much more broader purpose as opposed to going to traditional real estate venture. In other words, we start to look at how technology disrupts, and it becomes a great disruptor towards traditional environments and settings.
Yeah.
There was a time where we needed great buildings called commercial real estate. Those days, they're not gone, not by a long shot, but the wane has definitely started, where we're seeing conversion of commercial realty for residential spaces. But going back to the analogy per the smart city construct, it's when we start to think about the autonomous vehicles, the motor vehicles, the cars, less dependent on that. Now how we ingress and egress and go to different places is going to completely change. And I might add, virtually, we could begin to look at how technology will teleport us to places where we don't need a car at all. Telepresence. See, all technologies abide within the great eco-habitat, and these technologies, artificial intelligence, which is flanked by machine learning and deep learning, the acronym of XR, extended reality, which is flanked by virtual and augmented reality, and robotics, it's flanked by mechs and androids, IoT and digital twins, and fintech with crypto assets and NFTs. All these technologies abide within the great eco-habitat, but they begin to grow and they cross-pollinate. It's what we call emerged pairing, which leads to the fundamental construct of the smart city itself, which then leads to technological convergence. Meaning technological convergence is, how did these great amalgamations that on a amorphous scale have turned to what we don't know yet? How will they work together one-on-one? In other words, all these so-called futurists out there are trying to predict this is what the future will be. There's certain things that are easy to predict because we already seen what's happened in the past. So when we talk about ethnography, the intentions are already, these technologies aren't new. That's why I call it emerging. And these technologies are new. Okay. In fact, all the technologies, every single technology that we interact with today and that we're involved with today has gone through the peak of inflated interest. Now we're kind of going to Gartner's hype cycle. Peak of inflated interest down into the trough of disillusionment, which is the fail state. Which fail data could be good, it could be bad. That means all these, this is the next great thing, and then it fails, and you don't see it anymore. Right? You don't see it.
Right.
But then these technologies that go into the trough of disillusionment, there are other technologies that come and say, let me pick a little thing or two out of the swamp or out of the trough itself. From that, good data is often created based on failed data. Based on this trough of disillusionment, then we find ourselves erecting out of that onto the slope of enlightenment on our way to the plateau of productivity. So what happens when we start to interact and deal with technology, there's a cycle that's about.
Right. That's what I was just going to say.
But the great thing that's happened, which is fascinating and things that we've never seen before, Andrew, is we now find ourselves, and here's what's interesting. Technology disrupts old technology. And that technology is then superseded by great technology. It's what we call the disrupt. But never have we been in a time where we find ourselves where a pandemic has disrupted technology.
Right.
Across the board, technology and how we use it today is dramatically different. You go from 10 million users to 400 active million users in Zoom in a matter of course of months. And look, Zoom didn't just start March 2020, March 1st. Zoom was already here. Blue Jeans was here. Hangouts was here.
Right. That's true. They were positioned.
So now we're sitting here saying, okay, what's with this meteoric rise of non-fundable tokens? Non-fungible tokens have been around for some time. Why all of a sudden are we seeing a $2.5 billion raise in the first 2 quarters of 2021 with NFTs, and then almost a 700% increase in Q3 alone to $11.5 billion? We've never seen a technology raise and rise that quick.
Yeah, the adoption rate is much faster of technology now.
Now, why is that? Because when we start to look at the precursor or the things that will be brought into the metaverse itself, metaversal components, when we start to look at the things that actually make up the metaverse itself, now that we become more virtual, Andrew, now we're starting to say, I know that we can meet in these spaces, but can we do transactions in these spaces? And if so, in what ways? Now the minds of humanity are beginning to think, and ingenuity is coming about. And they're saying, oh, you can do this in a virtual space. So now we're starting to see that. Which
is so the pandemic leading to Zoom was a gateway for what we're seeing now.
It's been a massive gateway.
So let's dive into the metaverse. Define the metaverse for us.
The first thing that I'll say is that the metaverse is singular. It's not a proto-metaverse, as some people may say, or metaverses. The metaverse is a pie. And the contributions of this pie are slices, which are metaversal. Now, today we define the metaverse largely by what we see visually and interact with, what we commonly refer to as virtual and augmented reality. The metaverse today was some of the best that we can put forth and say this is what it is virtual worlds. However, just as we go back into the great ecohabitat and look at how technologies emerge and cross-pollinate with one another, on a morpho scale, we don't necessarily completely know what the metaverse will manifest to. What we do know is what it's not. It's not the next internet. The internet abides within the metaverse. Web3, it abides within the metaverse. Remember, technology moves in 3 phases: increments, shifts, and leaps. Increments, shifts, and leaps, the idea behind the incrementation would be an updated iOS system. The idea when you start to look at a shift would be usually hardware again. So new hardware that's coming to scene, desktop, tablet, laptop, mobile device, perhaps a head-mounted display or a virtual reality headset, or AR glasses, augmented reality glasses. The increment only affects a certain amount of audiences because not everybody has an iOS, not everyone has an Android. The leap only affects, again, a certain amount of audiences, but there's greater adoption with the leap, the hardware. But the shift, that's the rare one. The shift, the internet, the cloud, the metaverse, that affects everyone. Why is it as capped? I do think at some point, not yet, at some point that blockchain may be considered a shift.
Now, why do you say it may be considered a shift? And I mean, there's a lot of potential with the blockchain, right?
Because what happens with the blockchain is that it's ironing itself out. Proof of work, proof of stake, proof of history. ERC 721, ERC 1155, the standards have already been set out there. We know that right now, ERC 721 isn't a huge thing to celebrate when it comes to Ethereum because it costs so much energy. That's why we're seeing so many people that are fans of proof of stake.
So can you explain that a little bit? Because not everyone listening is going to know what those are.
Absolutely. So when you have a blockchain, what a blockchain does is it records or timestamps data or time itself. And it says this thing happened at such and such time. And it stays within these blocks. The first block being the Genesis block. Every other block outside of the Genesis block gets all of its dictations from the Genesis block itself, from the head, just like messenger RNA gets its dictations from DNA. So what happens is that this information is stored and recorded block to block in a chain. Now, if somebody wants to mint something, to solidify something in this chain, other people in the network get this information because all of this is what we call decentralized. It means it's not just stored in one place, it's stored in many places. So centralization, decentralization. So centralization in, decentralization out. It means it goes everywhere. And people have it recorded on their platforms. That takes a lot of energy because they're competing to be able to mint that so that they can get some of what we call gas, which is Ethereum, which is a crypto asset, so that people can earn some crypto, some assets to be able to do that. That's what we call the process of proof of work. That means they have in their machines proof you own that. So you're not just relying and dependent on one specific single entity. Now we have proof of stake, which is saying, hey, it's costing too much fees. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a select amount of people not necessarily competing, but they're going to put in some of their own value add. One for safety, to say, okay, it's safe to be able to do this transaction. We're not out to get you, because if we do, then we lose out ourselves of our own assets that we put in there collectively. So proof of stake is dramatically more friendly to the earth, if you will, when it comes to energy consumption, and reduces the carbon footprint. The proof of history is a new emerging technology of the chains that's now dealing with time. But we won't go there today. There's a lot with that even myself I'm really understanding. So proof of work and proof of stake are the two dominant blockchains that we see emerging. But by far, proof of work is still there. But Ethereum's doing a better job, I think, now of going in its conversion of going into proof of stake, which is fantastic. But back to the original sentiment of the blockchain becoming a leap, is as I believe that it will affect, once we have mass migration into virtual world constructs, that it will affect how we go about doing business daily. And I believe that it will affect not just decentralization, but centralization is already finding ways to be able to use this brilliant technology.
Yeah, that was really a great explanation of it all. So let's talk about the applications of, virtual and augmented reality, because you're working on a lot of different applications and use cases for it. So can you just kind of tell us, some industries where this could be useful and how it could be used?
I believe the biggest industries that I know that I'm looking at right now, and that I believe that stand to have the biggest gain with the metaverse today, the metaversal platforms. At the top of my list, I'm going to say fashion, real estate. Virtual real estate is a huge, huge opportunity. The medical health wellness is huge. And then education, I will put as the one that I think is the most important. But when we talk about the metaverse, what we're really talking about is the power of expression, identity, and ownership. When you and I go into Twitter, and Facebook, and Instagram, we own nothing. We own none of it. But when I go into a virtual world, I actually may own some of it, and it's solidified on the blockchain. That means it's mine forever. I own it. And if I don't own any land or real estate, Andrew, through interoperability, a terminology that we use called interoperability, meaning that my avatar that I have in Facebook will be the avatar that I can use in Microsoft's world, Jane's world, Jill's world, Pete's world, Andrew's world. My avatar, my fashion, my satchel as I operate in this given world is the same way that we're looking at virtual spaces. In other words, that means to tell, wow, you mean when I go into Fortnite, the same character that I have in Fortnite is the same character that comes to me in World of Warcraft, the same character that comes to me to my business meeting in my Zoom world? Yeah.
Wow.
So now all of a sudden your avatar, when you're headed to your Zoom business meeting from coming out of Fortnite and blowing people up, you're going to change it to your suit. Well, you just invested in a $200 Prada suit, Gucci loafers. And you're going in there, and that's your flow, that's your style. And guess what? You bought an NFT, so it's a one of a kind or one of 100 small batch. Oh, those Nikes that you just bought, physically bought at the Great Mall. Well, you get a little certificate, and it gives you a digital version of that and says, okay, I have my Nikes that I wear in the real world. This is the way it reflects, and I want to reflect in the virtual world. So I am a digital clone of myself, the way that I am and the way that I want to be perceived as.
Wow.
The closer and the further that we get into human eye resolution at scale, when we start thinking about visual communication and fidelity within the metaverse itself, that begins to change the narrative even more. Metahumans and face and technologies like we see with Epic and what they're building and the incredible things that they've built with Unreal Engine. Now we start to complement that with full body rigging and virtual scans of ourselves. We could be more than what we've ever wanted to be here in the real world if people will deal with us and treat us differently. We can level up in different ways. We can find ourselves with more real virtual real estate than physical real estate, but it could have real world implications because now in value, because I can sell it.
Right.
Now,
and you can take it out of there back into here and vice versa.
Andrew, I just heard that you own Grant Street in Mountain View, Silicon Valley, and you own 70% of that real estate that you bought 3 years ago or that you bought today that nobody thought would be much. Now that real estate is worth millions.
Right.
So we're seeing 900,000, 800,000, 700,000, 500,000, $500,000 transactions for real estate happening right now all over the place in platforms like Decentraland. We're seeing people pay for this kind of things when it comes to some type of fashion assets that they have. So expression, identity, and ownership. Ownership.
Wow.
And I know you know a lot about ownership and when it comes to being able to deal with real estate, because that's a big part of the brand that you've been building for yourself for a very long time. A tip of the hat to you.
Yeah, real estate, stocks, but yeah, ownership in general, huge. Man, this is really interesting. And, you kind of jumped maybe 10 steps where I was thinking, but I love that conversation. I guess I wanted to dive in a little bit on, some of these applications as far as you had just touched on medical, education. I want to just kind of understand, because I have some ideas in my head, but I want, to kind of hear, from your standpoint, because let's just start with medical. Let's just start with that one. The way that I've kind of heard of virtual reality working in Augmented and some of the companies I've been looking at as an investor, but being able to be in like an operating room with a physician, maybe they're using a new device, right? Maybe new medical device that they might be implanting in someone. And actually personally, like my degree is actually in biomedical engineering. And so I know that like medical device companies would have people fly there and they would be there sitting there with the doctors while they're working and implanting these devices. But now I'm like, imagine if you can put on your virtual glasses and you could virtually be there. And that was one way, at least that I've heard of, where this virtual reality was being used in.
Of course. You're spot on. We start talking about surgical theater training, development, and enhancement. So in the surgical theater, for those that are listening, we start talking about the surgical theater. It's just that. It's very dramatic. It is a theater, and there are things that happen that save people's lives or may not be able to. And with technology, a surgeon is able to, in real time, go and to do a CAT scan or CT scan of the ailment and discover the ailment internally within the body, anywhere within the head cavity, chest cavity, lower abdominal cavity, within the whole body. And they're able to go in there and to take that scan and propagate it or augment it externally on the outside of the body. So then when she or he goes to do a precision or cut, if you will, incision, and do a cut, they're able to see exactly where they're going more accurate, because maybe they're using point cloud precision where it's jot and tittle specifically right where it needs to be cut. So point cloud accuracy, and perhaps we're even using gestural interface controlling a Da Vinci robotic machine.
Yeah.
And how about this? Yep. Perhaps they're in Costa Rica doing a surgery all the way in Stanford.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great point.
So virtual.
Now you've got the robot.
Now you've got robotics, and everything's playing within that smart city or that ecosystem that we're talking about. How we're able to not only necessarily just be dependent on robots in terms of our daily work, or a technology, if you will, but to be able to use this technology, to advance and at the same time save time, move with more rapidity, because there's certain surgeons that practice and there's only so many practitioners. There's a scarcity to some degree, even of nurses. There's only certain practitioners that can do certain things. She or he can only be somewhere at so many different places at one given time. But through telepresence, we're able to teleproject ourselves into the surgical theater in real time. But the other thing is about the virtual training. Instead of using physical cadavers, which we could use, but using virtual cadavers, and we're allowed to make mistakes when we train, right?
Right.
So we're allowed to make mistakes. We can see how we can perfect it better. And the more and more platforms that are coming out, like OSO VR and so many other terrific platforms that have just done really great contributions for medical XR and AR, it makes it very promising with what we can do and how we perform. I mean, can you imagine that, say, if you're on a hike in a canyon and you're met with bad weather, a terrible accident, and you happen to have AR glasses and you need to perform doing a tourniquet or something to someone that's sitting next to you and they can't get to you, but you have good communications where you're able to be led by a doctor that can teach you how to go about doing the specific thing that you need. Or how about you don't enjoy Wi-Fi, cellular, or Starlink, but what's embedded into your emergency glass kit is an aid that's right there that tells you everything that a doctor would do in that given situation.
Yeah, that's impressive, man. That is really impressive.
Yes, sir.
Just to think about. I love it. And so, that's probably more like, I could totally see that on the education side, when you had mentioned the educational opportunity and training and in multiple areas and fields too, even outside of medical.
I'm working with universities right now as we speak, public and private schools, to be able to what I think may lead to the biggest transaction that's ever happened in the immersive industry for education, and that is to help usher in academia as a whole into the virtual metaverse, if you will. In other words, we've seen the great disaster that happened when it came to COVID-19 and how, unfortunately, many communities, especially our underserved, but even so-called served communities, that they did not have a way to be able to remote learn and to be taught. And teachers were really stuck in a pickle with how did they get this information that their children desperately need. In this present day, there shouldn't be an excuse for that. If adults in the working sector can use Hangouts and the things that we use, that we might want to consider coming down to where our students are, whether it's our young people and even our collegiate level students, that we can bring them into a virtual world, get them the education, the curriculum, and I would submit, in some ways, give it a better learning experience with greater fidelity through perceptual fidelity and cognitive fidelity experience than they will in even traditional environments. Look, the case study has gone out, Andrew. Some companies are saying, look, we've gone virtual and we're never going back.
100%.
Some companies like Twitter saying, you never have to come work here again. Salesforce saying, you can go hybrid. So I think the good investment, and I'm not and I have to state I'm not giving financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor, that should be known, but you kind of want to look at the metaverse realistically, holistically, as what is it good for today? And to me, from what I'm seeing, if you're looking at something to invest in and say, how do I approach this from an investor lens? To me, I might consider the medical industry, which is probably the most lucrative of any vertical that's within the industry index of what's worth investing in. Secondarily, I believe that education is a huge, huge opportunity to really. The workforce has changed, but education hasn't changed dramatically yet. But
Right.
if you change education, now we're talking about something really cataclysmic, because they need to be involved with more immersive simulation environments. They need to be propagating the hyper-realistic immersive simulated environments. They need to understand how this works. And fortunately, many technologists really haven't appreciated the need and the power of mentorship and teaching. We are the teachers, and we move more faster than the United States government itself. Silicon Valley is more advanced than the United States government in technology. That's not a known secret. It's real. That's why you see, no matter who the sitting president is, you see the CEOs and vice presidents sitting with the president, updating them on what it is that they need to know about where we're at, because technology moves so fast, and we have to be good stewards for the countries that we find ourselves living in, and really for humanity. And that's why I'm getting ready to launch the biggest summit that's ever happened for the metaverse, which I'm happy to share with you and your audience, Andrew, GatherVerse in February.
Wow.
So GatherVerse, I mean, we're going to have HBCU campuses and all different types of contributaries of the metaverse being involved in this great summit, so that people can better understand what it is, and we can get more on the same page and be able to express what we'd like to see based on humanity for all, equality for all, education for all, community development, wellness, and safety and privacy.
That's great. And you said that's in February?
Yes, sir. It's February, and it's going to be on the 22nd and the 23rd. We make the official announcement about a week and a half, but I just thought it was so apropos to share it here on your podcast show.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it for sharing that. And I do agree with you. You know, this is really important, and I feel that, you know, education is definitely needs an overhaul. You know, it's been that way. It's kind of lagging a lot of things, and if this is going to be the new world, and you were talking about, you know, potentially doctors, surgeons being out there in the field, and just regular people getting used to this, you know, why not start in school, right? Why not get used to that technology in school? So I think it's brilliant.
I mean, think about that for a second too, Andrew. I mean, with all of your accomplishments and what you do, how many more people can you now get a hold of now that we've become more virtual in our communication?
Exactly.
What if you can you imagine just for one share that you could give to, let's say, a group of 50,000 students, how their life would change? How many students' lives would be greatly impacted and changed from 1 hour session with you talking about just what you've done?
Yeah, that's so true. And the world has changed. I was coached by some world-class speakers, and it's amazing listening to them say, you know, I can do 3 or 4, you know, speaking engagements in a day, which, you know, I used to have to fly. That might be 1 in a week or 2 in a week if I was lucky. So it's amazing where technology has brought us in such a short amount of time.
I agree.
Because, yeah, COVID, you know, it really changed a lot of things. It pushed a lot of things forward. So let's talk about, what do you think the next 5 to 10 years looks like?
In terms
of, I guess, technology and just like the world. Are we gonna be, is IoT gonna be, are we gonna be there yet? Maybe the smart cities, like where are we at in terms of this timeline? Kind of we talked about.
We're there now when it comes to smart city development and construct. We're just at a very low percentage right now.
Mm.
5 to 10 years, what I would say is fine. Let's look at it. 5 to 10 years, in 5 years' time, I would say in 10 years' time, you can expect to be having dinner with Siri as a hologram, and Alexa will be
All
somebody
right.
that you're looking at, and they'll be looking at you. 10 years' time, you probably can expect to see different laws, that some rights advocacy for artificial, um, I won't sentience, if you will. I would say that in 5 to 10 years' time, virtual constructs, haptics will be firmly legitimate and used in 10 years' time. I'd say in 10 years' time, Web3 will definitely have entered into its ascendancy for the decentralized community, wanting it to be what they've wanted it to be for some time. We will see a different way that we go about business globally. You can definitely expect for the gig economy, for so-called gig workers to be the mainstream dominant vertical in how money is made because of the ease of use and transactions and the things that people will need. You will see dramatic, and I mean dramatic, disruptive job layoffs. And there will have to be programs in place for government to come in and to put support programs in place for millions of different people that have lost their jobs due to obsolescence. You're going to see that. Dating is going to be different. How we eat, when we go to restaurants, ghost kitchens. Look, the prolific rise of ghost kitchens over the past 19 months. That's dramatic.
What's explain a ghost kitchen to me? I'm not sure I
So
know
when
what
I go
that
to
is.
Grubhub, I can go to Uber Eats, I can go to Eat24. I look at a place, it has a restaurant, it has food, it has a menu, but that same menu, that same place may be coming from the same kitchen as the hoagie place where I could buy a sandwich, as where I can buy pizza, where I can buy sushi. These ghost kitchens mean that there's multiple kitchens in one restaurant establishment and different brands that they have in packaging, and one chef or multiple chefs cooking food all inside one kitchen. The reason that's so
Gotcha.
significant is that we're no longer subjected to, in a large way, we're no longer subjected to commercial real estate. In other words, think about this for a second. I mean, we're no longer subjected to commercial real estate bias. You know, there's a time where if you said, hey, I work virtually, that you weren't necessarily in this society considered serious because you didn't go through the standard traditional protocols of what other people have to do to go through 14 to 15-hour work commutes per week, that you had to go in that standard, right? You didn't have a Palm Pilot, it's not corp standard, your phone's not real. You don't have a BlackBerry, your phone's not real, right? You don't have an iPhone,
Right.
XYZ, it's not real. Now it's like, it's a free for all, it's a heyday. So really, frankly, the way that we operate has been decentralized.
Yeah. It's a great way of putting it.
So when we look at the changes that we'll see happening in society, right now, as you and I yet speak, it's dramatic. Let me add this one in too, Andrew. You know, oftentimes we heard about the phenomenon farm to table, right? We've enjoyed good fare and good food at restaurants with our family and loved ones and friends. But what about field to door? That means where I can go put on a headset, and I don't have to go to Whole Foods. I don't have to go to Safeway or another grocery store. I can put on my headset, go to the farmer itself, walk through the farm, put a direct order with that farm, and that farmer will distribute a bag of russet potatoes or golden potatoes or red potatoes, whatever suits your fancy, and that will arrive to my door.
Wow.
Part of the disrupt is removing the intermediaries because we found direct connections to what we want. Can you imagine if we had greater access to all the different environments that don't even enjoy countries and towns that don't even enjoy good, decent Wi-Fi to our standards would be considered bad? The more access that you have, whether it's Starlink or just Wi-Fi in general, the greater access, that means the more access that people have to you for communicating for natural resources that you have on your land. That's abundant. They're abundant untapped troves of natural resources that are just waiting for communication.
Wow. That was good. That was really good. I want to touch on something you had mentioned a little bit earlier. So with technology, yes, jobs will get lost, but also jobs will be created. So, when we talk about the rise of the internet, right? A lot of things came with the rise of the internet, web development that wouldn't have existed, a lot of other things. So what type of new jobs do you see being created with some of this technology?
And you can you can run with this, and you're absolutely right. Through the apps evolution, we saw the rise of jobs for technical jobs. But how many companies were put out because what's now on my phone? How much money has Texas Instruments lost because now everyone has a calculator? It may appear that we've had great rise in jobs, but we've lost a lot, and people have had to adapt. To your point, a lot of them have adapted into the ranks of technology. The biggest rise that we'll see in technology when it comes to people being hired within this space is customer service. It's the customer service apparatus. It's going to come down to who can have the most happy. The whole doctrine, the biggest part of the doctrine of Amazon and its wild success is based on customer service. Jeff Bezos did a terrific job in understanding that the number one thing that I have to get right is customer service, because I'm going to make a lot of mistakes and I need a lot of people to apologize. I need to hire a lot of people to say I'm sorry and to make things right. See, that's what a lot of technology companies get wrong, is because you hire all these, you try all these new things and different things, but you ain't got nobody that you hired to say, I'm sorry, let me make this right. Bezos said, I need to deal with that ahead of time, Andrew.
I got to tell you the story, because so I tried the Amazon delivery. Right. First time they messed up the order. Couple of things were missing. And, you can go on the app and you can say something's wrong. And you say something's wrong, and literally within seconds, I'm on the phone with someone. And she's like, okay, well, we can just refund you. Sorry about that. And I'm like, that took like maybe 2 minutes.
And it's now when I do my Amazon delivery orders, and sometimes they may get it wrong, I don't even talk to someone. Oh, refund. Okay.
Wow. But, that's extraordinary. And it is interesting to me because, just to your point, it's really frustrating these days when everything is so automated and you're like yelling on the phone and they're like, say this, say that, and they don't understand. And I mean, it takes you, maybe 10, 20, sometimes 30 minutes just to get a real person on the phone. And so I totally agree with you. The fact that he did such a great job with the customer service, that really is something for businesses to keep in mind as we.
Yes, sir. And the thing that we look at, to your point, what can't artificial intelligence do yet? It can't identify human sentiment in that regard. It's great as deep learning can be with elasticity and all the different things that come with neural development and neuron networks artificially developed. Human sentiment, knowing when to say sorry. Hey, let me make this right. Talking to somebody. Going back to first principles. Some old school things made right, made better. So customer service has gone through innovation as well. And for me, Amazon undoubtedly leads the pack. I believe that Google placed a lot of its wage on automation, and I believe that it's suffering from this. Apple has gotten their act together. Google was one of the bigger platforms, and I'm a huge fan of Google. It's one of my favorite platforms. There's some things that I have concern about with their privacy, frankly, here in the Valley, but I've been a huge fan of the democratization of tools and utility that Google has helped a lot of people, such as myself, to be able to have startups and to be able to use great tools for nothing. The cost is obviously being ads and privacy, which is a concern. But when you think about Google and the services, it really has some of the worst customer service that I've used and experienced for somebody that's been part of their ecosystem for some time in comparison. to Amazon. If Amazon wasn't there, then I say Google's pretty good. So Amazon has raised the standard, which comes to the question that you asked, what do I think will be the number one thing that people need to focus on? It's going to be customer service for sure.
Yeah. And and that's why I think, to your point, Amazon stuck out to me so much that day, because now I've gotten so accustomed to this long wait just to get a hold of a person or to resolve an issue. So that's
It
a
makes
great
you want to
point.
spend your money
That's
with them,
really good.
doesn't it? It makes you want to say,
Exactly. It made me say, you know what? It didn't work out this time, but next time, I'll consider using them.
the loyalty is just, I mean, for me, there's certain things I may buy that I usually would go to Best Buy to get. Now, Best Buy has done a good job with its customer service, and what Hubert Jolie, who's a friend of mine, who's the former CEO that turned the whole company around, Hubert did, who's at Harvard now. But what Best Buy said, you know what, we need to get, how Hubert turned it around, Best Buy? It can't compete with the shelves of Amazon. How did you turn Best Buy into a $40 billion asset? How did you grow and scale Best Buy? You know what Hubert did? Turned on the customer service meter and said, this is about customer satisfaction. This is about saying, oh, you bought this product last week? Here's your money back. No questions asked. No hassle, no none of that. What do you need? Oh, you need it. I don't care if you bought 1,000 different things. Refund. Because that's what Bezos, he said, look, we can't beat them, so we have to join them. I can't beat Bezos. There's not a product that I can get that he can get unless it's something that we proprietarily build and develop. How do I compete with this juggernaut? Customer service, a friendly face, somebody that you can talk to on the ground. So one saving grace of Best Buy is that you have someone on the ground that you can talk to. Else they would be doing what Amazon does, but the conversion would be too different. Target did really well in this adjustment during the pandemic. Said, hey, you know what? Just pull up in front. We got you. How many platforms are seeing that? Most people, they're just like, hey, just pull up, pop trunk. We're good. Here's your pizza. Here's your this. Here's your bag of target. We don't care if you buy a $2 eraser. We will bring that out to your walk outside and bring it in a nice bag, and we will put it in your trunk and ask you, do you want us to close the trunk? So, Andrew,
Exactly.
So where are we headed? Are we really headed into a customer service centric way of business unlike anything we've ever seen before, with the power of the cloud happening and us using and becoming more dependent on and more autonomous as owners and business owners, be able to work from the comforts of our home?
Yeah. It's a very exciting future. So you mentioned standards. I had noticed you had standards of the metaverse in your bio. So I want you to touch on that. I think that's definitely going to be a big topic in the near future. If it's not already a topic right now, I'm sure someone's talking about it, right?
In the standards of the metaverse, I was thinking about what people were talking about when it comes to the metaverse and all the different things, whether it's interoperability or whether that's the type of decentralized transactions or hyperrealism and headsets and all that. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I mean, I enjoy that talk from time to time too. And there's a bit of banter between people back and forth and debate and argument. But I was sitting down and I was thinking about what is it I actually want the metaverse to be? What does the metaverse look like to me? And the metaverse to me was first, that was humanity first, thinking that we look at technology and extended reality that, and I've been saying it for some time, that if we're going to extend reality, then we must bring reality with it. And I said all the way, probably back in June, maybe the first time that I think I may have said it, that if we're going to have you can't have a metaverse without meta people. Interesting that Facebook named his company Meta, which is fine. But we think about human-centered development and design. And often what happens is that you'll get a pack of developers and artists that build these virtual spaces, and then they say, okay, get the marketer now and bring them in. Which you should always be in your product delivery teams building with the marketer. That's just me. But what happens now, Andrew, is we have to look at it a little bit different and saying, why don't we develop communities first and then build spaces that go around them. Right? If you have a tribe, if you have a village, they'll know what they want that location that they eventually settle in to be, and how they want it to behave and what they want it to provide. And what happens is that we haven't done a good job in extending reality. When settlers came here and when natives were already here, when people migrate, oftentimes they go to places where the land had what they needed. It's got good ground for me to be able to plant. It's got good water springs for me to be able to pull from a well. It's got good fishing or game for me to eat. And from there, we built our homes, communities, neighborhoods, villages, tribes. But when we think about XR, extended reality, virtual worlds, we haven't really identified what are the needs of humanity to really better serve them. We've just created what we think that they're going to want and what we're telling them that they should get or what they should be involved with. And we've forsaken the greatest technology on the face of this planet, which is the human body and the brain being the most advanced database on the face of this planet. In other words, we need to unlock the minds of people to better understand what it is that we're going to be building and what we could build. So I wanted to take an approach that Andrew I wanted to approach it sensibly with how we go about a dialogue and conversation when it comes to the metaverse itself and how we look about it and go about building it. Because the reality is that 98 to 99% of the world doesn't even know what the metaverse is. And candidly, I would admit to you that 90% of the world doesn't even know what virtual reality is. You go and ask them, they say, isn't that a 90s video game? So we haven't really done a good job as best we can when it comes to educating what this technology is, what's its use case, what's it for, and how enterprises and consumers alike can benefit and for their families.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. So I assume then your event in February is going to be touching on a lot of this.
7 tracks, 80 plus speakers, 14 plus moderators, 20 plus sessions.
Wow.
2 days, and widespread throughout different watch parties and different places for people to be able to live stream. And yes, sir, that's part of the big foundation of it is the 7 standards that I shared that has gone viral. It's been shared, I don't know, I think it's over 60 times on LinkedIn alone, and it's just gone out there. And what I like about this opportunity that we have is that everyone gets an opportunity to participate that wants to participate. It's not just going to be just for us industry people kicking things back and forth, the roundtables, but it's going to be other people listening in and saying, hey, what you say will be heard. What will you say? What will we share? So I do believe that it's based on an open dialogue and express how you feel. And I plan on getting some professionals who I've come to appreciate that I believe do have something to contribute, really have rolled up their sleeves, chopped a lot of wood in this space in the respectable verticals of the 7, and really have a good sense on, from their lens perspective, on what we might be able to do and what we can do to move forward. So I want really engaging beneath the surface dialogue and to really take it there. And hopefully the recorded discussions and shared to how many different communities we can get it out there to that are listeners.
Right. Well, definitely let me know when, or send an invite. You kind of said when it was, but yeah, if I could sit in on that, I'd love to
be happy to have you, and definitely will extend the invitation into you and your audience. We're happy to have everyone that's within your ecosystem. We'll make sure you get a front seat virtually.
Yeah, that'd be great. I just want to thank you for, just taking the time to really share with the Expanding Wallet community, what the metaverse is, because a lot of people don't understand that, the virtual reality, the applications of it, and also, your perspective on how to go about building it. I think that was brilliant. And so, just again, really appreciate you taking the time out to speak with me and share with the
Andrew,
Expanding
thank you
Wallet
for
community.
inviting me to the Expanding Wallet community. You're doing a fantastic job in enlightening and updating people on how they go about doing the business of dealing with financial transactions and investments. I just think it's so important for all communities and all our citizens to come to appreciation and awareness of the resources that are available to people to go into the right steps, because there's so much information that has people going the wrong way. And so helping guide people in the right way and doing it the right way, it means a lot. And I appreciate you sharing your community with me, and I look forward to sharing my community with you.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And, I've been learning about investing and managing money since 15, and there's definitely never been more opportunities than now. And so, to your point, a ton of information out there, but a lot of it could be said to be distractions. And so, trying to help filter through some of that is part of what I'm doing with the Expanding Wallet, and also sharing my network and people that I meet that I think are interesting and have great points of view and can talk about the future like yourself. So wonderful to have you on, man. And we'll definitely be staying in touch. And for everyone else listening, remember to learn all that you can, believe in yourself, and take actions that allow you to grow.